Yeah, okay. So, I guess we can get started. Today's going to be a little bit slightly more technical. The last few have been technical, but I hope it's kind of been translating into something that actually makes sense. So we're going to continue with corner-related stuff. Let me just start sharing my screen. It's just going to be background stuff for the moment, but something in the background.
So are we getting into geometry tonight of the corners? Is that kind of the way you were talking?
Yeah, sort of. So
don't worry, guys. If you didn't do well in geometry in school, we're gonna fix it now.
Yeah, it's very, very simple geometry, so don't get scared off. Share. Hopefully, can you guys see that now? Okay, cool.
Yep.
Yes. So.
Possibly, if for some reason knock it down to 720, it's kind of stuttering.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. Interesting that it's stuttering. I know my internet's been a little bit iffy recently, so here.
720.
I figured if nothing else, if you're...
Sorry, say that again?
I thought it was showing 1080-60, but a 1080-30 or 720-60, right, Larry?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was looking for.
I've just exited the replay, but yeah. So a little bit of geometry, and I'll get right into it. Basically, so what did we go over last time? It was kind of car placement. Maximizing our entry, our exit, making sure that we were, entering the corner at the right angle, not breaking away from the corner, all that kind of stuff. And today we'll look at analyzing corners and trying to figure out, what kind of corner is this, so that we can better understand what we need to do with the car through the corner. I'm not going to cover all types of corners today. I think it will bridge maybe the hardest ones, or the hardest ones to kind of tell the difference between, and maybe the ones with the biggest gap in how we approach them. So we'll start off with short versus long corners, and the first thing I'll say about that is, when I say short or long, I'm not talking about long braking zones. I'm talking about long turning zones. So really big arcs in the corner. I actually wouldn't, this is replays from Donington right now. I wouldn't say that Donington has any really massive corners where we're needing to slow down a lot. We're on the brakes for a long time through the corner, and then heading in apex. Spa has got a couple of them. That kind of long right-hander downhill after Lake Home. The corner name is escaping me. Where else? Any kind of carousel corner. So T1 at Zandvoort, for example, is another good one. So those are what we would quantify as long corners. So long, relatively long braking, and then long until the apex. And then short corners are obviously a lot easier. It's a similar kind of, not just stop and turn, but you're on the brakes for a lot less of the cornering phase when we're trying to initiate rotation in the corner. The really important things that we need to know about short versus long corners is if we're coming into the same corner at speed. And actually, you know what? I can even start. I'll show you guys visually here. Give me but a moment. So Mount Panorama, seeing as that's where we're at this week. This. So actually, this is another corner where we have quite a heavy braking zone, and then we've got, as we all know, we're braking pretty much up until the apex here. And so that's it. I would call this probably a medium corner, but for our purposes, I think we can use this. Up in the sky a little bit and zoom out.
At least you didn't do what Davin did the other night. We'd be seeing all of Australia.
Yeah, I had a tendency of doing that before, but I finally got it fixed. All right, so let's see if this handy program that was shown to me works again. It does. All right, so we're breaking roughly, somewhere around here, maybe a little bit earlier. But so we've got all this. Sorry, not straight line, but we've got all this section where we're.
Are you trying to show us your cursor?
Can you guys see? No, you won't be able to see that. Hold up. I will reshare my screen as my full desktop now. Thank you for reminding me.
Yeah, I was just saying I was looking for it and I didn't see it.
Yeah. Perfect. Change windows. Screens. There we go. Okay, perfect. You guys should be... Can you guys now see a cursor in a line?
Yep, I got it.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So we're breaking somewhere around here, probably a little bit earlier. Our racing line, as we all know, doesn't look that squiggly, but something like that. So what I'm basically trying to say here is we've got a portion of the rotation of the car, starting somewhere around here and at our apex somewhere around here, where we're both turning and on the brakes. And the shorter that distance is, the less time we have to get the car both, slow down in this section here, and then also continue to slow down, but the vast majority of what we're trying to do in this section here is turn, but we've got less time to do that in. So the shorter that this whole section is here, the faster we need to do everything, which means we need to take off more speed and turn more in the same, in a smaller, or sorry, rather we need to turn the same and take off the same amount of speed in a smaller actual turning radius. So what does that mean? We basically have to slow the car down quicker because we have less physical time to do that in. If you, and this gets exacerbated the more the corner kind of resembles a circle. So if you've got, you guys can imagine a small circle like this. Sorry, I'm turning making another track here. Versus
more like a hairpin.
Yeah, more like a hairpin. And I find the hairpins tend to illustrate the example the best. So we're slowing down. Let's say we're coming from 150 miles an hour. We start braking somewhere here, and we'll do another example, same kind of just to illustrate the point. So this is obviously a much longer circle. Braking here, we still are coming down from 150. You guys can kind of imagine that in the scenario on the right here, let's say it's to apex, let's say it's, I don't know, it may be wrong, but half a second, whereas from the apex to the apex here is 3/4 of a second. We're still coming down from 150, but we have a shorter time to, in this particular example here, we've got a shorter time to get stopped and rotated so that we can get back on power at the apex here. Half a second, 3/4 of a second. So we need to be, let's get that all erased now. We need to be aware of what the corner is actually doing, because we can't just assume that all corners are the same, long corners, short corners, and use the same brake and steering input into them. So what a lot of people notice, I find, for me personally, like that the long right-hander after Lake Home in Spa is a really good example. Is like a lot of people will over slow the car on entry because they're not making use of all that extra track space or time, and they basically get caught on the apex. So I don't know if you know what I mean, but it's that feeling of like, I'm waiting to get back on power, or I'm waiting to open up the steering wheel, because I know if I do it too soon that I'm going to end up going wide, because I haven't really reached the apex, but I'm already at the speed and angle I need for the second half of the corner, coming out here. So it's really important to make use of, make absolute possible use of every kind of corner they're at. So that's why we want to distinguish between fast and slow corners. And if we back this up,
You're asking about Puhan.
no, 2 corners before that.
Bruxelles?
Yes.
Turn 10, the hairpin?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Just run this forward a little bit. So this is T1. Probably zoom in a little bit. So this is T1 here, and we see, we're braking. I think the braking point is somewhere around there. It's tough to tell from this angle, but we've got way less distance and time to make our rotation. So obviously in this kind of corner, we need to be very hard on the brakes here, and we need to continue to rotate and slow down the car here. So our brake trace for this type of corner versus the one that we saw just before, the following corner, is going to be very different. So not everyone is going to look at data, but I think everybody kind of gets an idea of what a brake trace looks like. So your brake trace in this kind of corner is going to go up pretty sharp, and then it's going to end up coming down pretty sharply too, right? Because you're already needing, that's not quite right. You come up and then you got some trail braking. Versus,
hold up a second, you're breaking up on your voice.
Okay. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, it kind of faded out for a second, but you're back.
Okay, cool. So this is, that's your brake trace for this kind of corner, whereas the corner we were just looking at, because we've got more time, we can come up and maybe even use slightly less peak pressure, and it's going to be a much more gradual descent, because we don't need, much more gradual descent, sort of like that, because we don't need to bleed off all the speed right away. We can take our time and get the car nicely rotated in and not be as fast, because what would happen here is, if we, these 2 corners obviously are happening at different speeds, but what you can do is, if I overlay this other brake trace, it probably looks something like this. So if we use, this is that second brake trace I just put in there was, well, let's do it in a different color actually. This is, your brake trace from T1. So what happens if you use this one is, all this space here is you over slowing the car in the following corner. And when you over slow on entry, you can never get it back, halfway through the corner or on exit. You're always that this time is kind of always lost. So we can take advantage of these slow versus long corners to actually, increase our speed by slightly changing our brake trace. I'll stop there. Does anybody have questions? It doesn't make sense. Something that they thought of? No? Okay.
It's good.
Cool.
Please, guys, if you have any questions whatsoever, there's not a stupid question except the one you didn't ask.
Yeah, that's really true. And kind of the last thing I'll say on this is, so you ask yourself, okay, Josiah, this is all great, but how do I figure out if I'm braking too much for a corner? I think it's a long corner, I think it's a medium corner. How do I know? And just next lap, be more progressive in your brake trace. So, if you think you might be able to carry a little bit more speed, well, don't hop on the brakes quite so quickly, and start to bleed off the brakes a little bit earlier, but more progressively. And your answer to the question is basically, well, is the car, understeer, like am I carrying too much speed at the exit, and so I'm understeering, off on the exit, or even worse than that, am I not able to turn the car as much, to
Would you
actually
say
get
that
to
you're
the
looking
apex?
for a better bit of stability or less stability at when you change your braking ability when you change the type of braking you're doing?
I wouldn't say so. No, so that's not the primary thing. Like if you're getting more or less, I mean, obviously the more progressive you are, the more stable it's going to be. So that's a nice side effect of taking advantage of longer corners. But here, I'll go to what I was claiming was the longer corner, so I can. Too far now. Let's see. There you go. So basically, like if you're, if you're doing this corner here, there we go, better. And you say, okay, I'm going to be more progressive. So brake trace was like this, to get all your braking done and make sure you're actually slowing down. But then you decide, okay, I'm going to do something more, not quite as, maybe not quite as much max brake pressure, but also, a more gradual taper off. That's not really perfect, but you get what I mean. And what you're having trouble hitting the apex here, well, okay, I was carrying too much speed into the corner. Or, like I was saying, you hit the apex, but like you're out here on exit, clearly wide. Okay, that was a little bit too much. So then you go somewhere in between this. And that's how you actually test whether you're carrying the optimal amount of speed into the corner. But you can achieve that by slightly altering your brake pressure, at the beginning and then through the corner. So yeah, that's the first part. The second part, and again, stop me if you have any questions about this. But the second part, and maybe the the most useful of the of tonight's clinic, is talking about maximum rotation point. Does that term mean anything to anyone? Can anybody guess at what it means?
It I think I can guess what it means. It means the point of where when you shift the center of balance, it's when it either gets too loose or too tight.
It can be. And that's actually really close. So basically, the point of maximum rotation is where the car is basically turning. It's got the most degrees of rotation through the corner. And I'll kind of go through why that's a thing. So, we all talk about, or at least in my clinics, and a lot of people have, talk about the turning circle. But in reality, it's not actually a circle. It's more of an ellipse. And I'm actually just going to go into Paint to show that. Not trading paints, just Paint. So basically, everyone talks about. Let's even just draw a corner, because. So, circle. Most people talk about that as your racing line. Well, it's not circle anymore, but you get it. The thing is most, or not most, but never is the actual line that your car follows a perfect circle, because the circle, you've got basically what is a constant rate of change. You're always turning the same amount through a circle. So the racing line is actually more of an ellipse. And that's going to depend on, obviously in a 90-degree corner, it's a lot closer to a circle. But if you imagine, if you're imagining a hairpin, for example, it's going to look something more like that. Can I erase this wholeheartedly? I cannot. So let's just start again. So hairpin something like this, and the faster it is, the more this is going to show up. But you're going to get something like this, and the reason for that is the more you slow down, the more the car is able to turn. We always hear that, right? It's kind of just the basics of one of the basics of car handling is if you want to be able to turn more, you have to bleed off speed. So what happens in reality is the car's ability to turn is kind of always going, in a spiral going inwards, right? So as you bleed off speed, you're constantly able to turn a little bit more. I mean, you can even test this in the parking lot if you don't believe me, but you end up, as you slow down, you end up being able to rotate the car more and more. So, to take this into this example, if you're braking here and slowing down the whole way through this arc, obviously at the apex, you're going to be able to turn the car way more than you were able to turn the car here, right? Like if you cranked on the same steering lock that you're using at the apex at the beginning of braking, what's going to happen? Your tires are going to lock up and you're going straight that way. So we have to keep in mind that as we go through the corner, we're able to turn more. So that, we need to first know that we're not talking about a true circle. One of the following points on this is that even in ACC, we have different cars, and those different cars have vastly different aero capabilities. So one thing to keep in mind is the more downforce a car has, the more its racing line is going to look like a circle. Does anybody think they know why that would be? You can just take a guess at it too. You don't have to know the answer. Okay, so the reason that is downforce. So what's happening when we're slowing down is we're allowing more grip to the tires to turn. So downforce is extra grip, essentially. So a car with high downforce compared to the same car coming from the same speed has more grip for the same amount of speed because of the air. Because of the aerodynamics of the car creating extra grip. So, let's, for the sake of argument, you're in a P-Cup car here versus a GT3 car. The P-Cup car has 10 units of grip. Well, at 100 miles an hour, the GT3 car might have 125 units of grip. 12.5 units of grip at this, for the same amount of speed. So it's got more to play with. And that's one thing to keep in mind when, you're same circuit but different cars is, you're just going to have less ability to turn the car from the same amount of speed as you're slowing down and rotating into it. So a car with higher downforce is just simply going to have a closer, racing line to a circle because it's got more to play with. But how do we apply, an arced racing line, and knowing why it's arced in this particular way to maximum rotation point? And that's basically because there's a certain point where you've got max rotation, and ideally that's at the apex right here. But why does it have max rotation? Well, that's because you're going the slowest. So the point of maximum rotation is basically your final point prior to entering the exit phase of the corner. And that point is always, or should always be, like 99.999% of the time, should be the slowest part of the corner. So when the car is rotating the most, you should be going the slowest. And that's your apex. Does that point make sense to everyone?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Because it's quite important, because when we get into the finer tuning of this, we want to be able to find our maximum rotation point. So, and I'll actually I have some data now. I'll I'll go on to this later. Like, you don't need data to find your maximum rotation point. You don't need you don't need to set up Motec, but you can if you want. Like, it's I will let you guys know it's doable. You can set something like this up. This is not Motec. It doesn't work with ACC, but basically just to get you guys to see this. So can you guys see my cursor?
Sure.
Perfect.
Yes.
Cool. So this is T1 at Suzuka, and you have our steering angle here. And let's just pay attention to basically the dark blue line, the solid blue line. So that's that's basically we're turning right through the corner. So we have our, so basically, and then up top here we have our minimum speed. So our minimum speed is right here, basically. What that should always coincide with, as we've just learned, is pretty much our minimum speed is actually here, it looks like. But anyway, what that should coincide with is the maximum amount of rotation in the corner. And that's what we pretty much see here. So there's a little bit here, and I'll explain that in a second. But roughly here is where we should see our maximum amount of rotation, and that's what you see here is our steering angle. So we know the car is rotating pretty much optimally as we get to where the apex of the corner is, and we can kind of see that here, right? Like, this is we all know T1 at Suzuka is a very long entry, and we almost apex, we apex not at all on the curbing. The apex of the corner is more truly right at the top here, even though you have an apex kind of curb here and another apex curb here. The true circle of the corner is this line here. And so what we can begin to do is figure out what's happening just in and around our maximum rotation point. And the first, the key thing here is we want to find our MRP as early as possible when we're practicing. So even on your practice laps, and I'll get out of here because that pretty much shows what I want to, but even on our practice laps, we want to be kind of finding where we think the slowest point on the corner is. And that's where we're able then to get on the power without running too wide. And we can start to fine tune basically our whole line at each corner around that maximum rotation point. The other really important thing, and I'll go on, my kind of last thing is actually how to find it, but I'd say maybe the most important thing about maximum rotation point is what it means in terms of physics of the car. And basically is, once you've reached that MRP, we should never be trying to give more steering input after the MRP.
Thank God I was hoping you'd say that.
Why? Because it means that you're wrong. And that's basically the simplest way I can put it. If we're trying to steer more after the apex, after our slowest point in the corner, after the MRP, something has gone wrong, because what it means is you actually needed more rotation than your maximum rotation point. Does that make sense? Do you guys see what I'm getting at?
Yep, because I've actually mentioned it a few times for certain people, and I'm not calling out names because I won't do that, but I have seen some people that will say, go into a corner, and either they were in the corner too fast, or they've turned in a little bit too early, and you can just see the thought process. It's like turn, and you see the wheel arcing over and arcing over and arcing over, and the car's still not turning at all, and all of a sudden they're just like, oops, I either clobbered the wall or gone off into the grass or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And so basically what happens when you're when we're at our maximum rotation point, and then we ask, because basically, what happens after we get to the maximum rotation point? Okay, we're back on power. We've hit the apex. We're ready to go. So if you're back on power, but also trying to ask the car to steer more than you were asking it before when you weren't on power, there's literally only one thing that's going to happen. So this is, roughly our MRP for this corner, or at least it was on on this lap. So if I then continue to ask, more rotation this way of the car, but simultaneously start getting on power, meaning increasing my speed, I simply cannot do anything but go wide here. It's the only thing that's going to happen. And so what that means is, okay, I've carried too much speed into the corner. I need to have the car rotated more or slightly slower, or at our maximum rotation point at a slightly slower speed, in order to properly apply, either, because we can keep the steering the same at our if we hit our maximum rotation point and we're steering at 40 degrees steering angle, we can maintain that steering angle and get back on power. Obviously, we're going to, our arc is going to start to get bigger, right? So if we're turning this much, and then we start, we keep that same steering angle, but we begin to hit the gas, well, that's obviously going to straighten out, right? So we're not going to have the same turning radius as we were before. So that's okay if the exit is here. But if the exit is here, then you're in trouble. So you're able to keep the same steering angle, but basically, once we hit that MRP, that's kind of your milestone. Did you get the car at the right speed, at the right angle, at that point? If you did, you should be able to exit the corner with the amount of steering lock you want, usually opening it up, and the amount of power you want. And that those two things are obviously going to depend on our corner exit. So that's one thing, is if you're trying to steer more after your apex, after your MRP, you need to alter what you did coming into the corner, because somewhere along the line, something's gone wrong. In simpler terms, if you're increasing your steering after MRP, you're understeering. Understeer is bad. We need to fix it. Go on, Larry. Do you have something to say?
I said that's the oops.
Yes, exactly. On the flip side of that, if you're gaining rotation after your MRP, one of two things happen. So that means, when I say gaining rotation, I mean you're not keeping, it's not a gradual opening up of the steering and increasing of that arc, right? So as this arc here, right, we have that increasing larger radius arc because we're increasing our speed and opening up our steering. If our arc is getting tighter with on the exit of the corner, one of two things that's not really tighter, actually, as we know, but you know what I mean. If on this corner you're actually able to continue steering into the corner easily while you're on power, one of two things are happening. Either you were way under the limit on entry, so you didn't carry nearly enough speed. So if the corner feels like really easy and you're exiting here with a ton of steering angle, you didn't take anywhere near enough speed into the corner, or you're about to spin because you're getting lots of oversteer, and lots of oversteer means either that or you're spinning. So for the people looking at data, and I'll just go back really quickly to this here. At this point here, if you're noticing I will do this. If you're noticing this increase kind of sharply right here, if you're looking at data, that's, you probably, you'd notice some counter steer, probably because you're correcting for a spin, basically. So it's one of two things. Any questions? Okay, cool.
I wanted to comment, actually.
Yeah,
so you probably will understeer if you increase or hold maximum steering on exit, but you can also spin in low speed corners where the rear tires can't take it when you step on the throttle. So
yes, yeah, exactly, yeah. So basically too much throttle in low speed corners, and yeah, you can spin there too. All right, so how do we find the MRP? And this is kind of going to be, this is where I was...
Practice.
Yeah. Basically what I'll do initially, and this is where I was kind of talking about the geometry of it is giving you guys almost a theoretical understanding of what we need to be doing through the corner to help you find the MRP. So basically, should I do it in paint or am I going to do it here?
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah,
real
go
quick?
on.
Now, say if you are knowledgeable, I guess you could say, about the particular corner or the track you're working on, do you think it would be beneficial to come through the corner at a moderate speed to be able to fine-tune the placement of the car, going back to last time you were talking about placement of the car, and then say getting quicker and quicker and quicker as you progress to do a little bit of quote unquote testing, if you want to call it, to see where the limit is?
Yes. That's also part of the reason I did our car placement and entry angle prior to this one, because I would say that's going to be more important for driver overall development, is to have that stuff down pat. Because so what would happen is, and I have a feeling you already know this, Larry, but in fact I know you already know this, but what would happen, so say if you looked at this clinic, you're like, okay, awesome, I'm going to practice this first before car placement, is what you're learning to do is you're learning your MRP and all that stuff, your rotation point, everything we're talking about today, from a suboptimal entry. So say you're starting your braking and turn in from here rather than, let's back that up, from here rather than right here. You're doing all your mental calculations, everything that your brain is telling you from this suboptimal line, when really what you want is to be doing out on the edge of the grass and here. And so I would say the first thing you need to build your instinct for is is the car on the absolute limit on entry? Have I set it up properly? And then once you have a good base, no one's going to be able to do that 100% effectively in just a few practice sessions, and we all need a kind of change of scenery. So it's totally okay to practice one thing for a few days and then move on to something else. But I would say that if you're a driver who's been told that they really need to work on using all the track, or you feel like the car is super unstable on entry and all that kind of stuff, and you don't know why, you should definitely, I would say, start with really exploring track limits first, making sure that your car placement is accurate before moving on to this fine-tuning of am I carrying an extra kilometer to an hour too much or too little into the corner, and where exactly is my maximum rotation point, that kind of thing. So yeah, that's the answer I'd give to that.
And yes, I followed that whole thing, just so you know.
Good. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So this here, and I'll get into the geometry here basically. Ilpo, if ever I make a mistake, I know this is something that you're probably better at than I am, but or anybody else for that matter. But anyway, the basic geometry of a corner, we're approaching at a certain speed here, and our exit direction, in this case, because it's a 180 hairpin, is 180 degrees the other way, so completely the opposite. Basically, what we're trying to accomplish in terms of a kind of math perspective when we're going through a corner is we always want our final direction, so that's the combination of the forces, the three forces being braking, our steering, and our acceleration. We always want the combination of whatever forces we are inflicting upon the car. That's not really the right word, but
well, sometimes it is.
yeah, depending on how violent we are. We always want that direction to point towards the final direction that we want to be going in the corner. So to break it down quite simply, as we're braking here, our braking force, what's it doing? Well, our braking force is actually a force in this direction here. And so where does that, this is the only thing we're doing to the car right now. We're braking in a straight line. Where is that going? That equals this, right? That equals our green line here. And yes, there's going to be some circumstances like we were talking about before where you might be needing to brake a little bit towards the outside, or depending on track particularities. We're not going to be totally not always totally going to be completely opposite to our direction of exit, but this is kind of a your basic explanation of it. So then I'm gonna have to extend the apex here for my purposes. Then so we're still braking, we're probably trail braking here, and we're turning. So our braking direction is pulling us this way, but we're rotating to the right. So we're turning the car this way. So the sum of those forces again is this way. So we're still equal to that. Then when we hit the apex, if we've done it properly here, so we're no longer braking, we're still turning right, but now we're accelerating. So in this particular circumstance here, for example, we're turning right, but we're wrong. We're turning right. We're also accelerating. And our final direction is here. So that's the basics of pretty much of any corner where you need to slow down a lot. And I specifically point out that difference because this still does apply, but it's sort of different in corners where you're just dabbing the brakes. Like we're trying to accomplish like really balancing the car and just slightly slowing down versus like taking off a lot of speed, getting through the corner and then getting on exit. So if you think, for example, a corner like 1, 2, 3, like 6 or 7 at Brands Hatch, the really fast right-hander after the straight, that corner, for example, like this wouldn't, don't think of that kind of corner when we're talking about this. Think of, T1, for example, at Bathurst, or T2. We have to take off a lot of speed, get the car rotated, and then we're back on exit. And the reason I show you guys this is because if we deviate from this final direction here in any of our phases, we're taking ourselves, the car, off the ideal line, off the ideal racing arc. So, for example, if in somewhere in this phase we're braking too much, and I'm just going to draw over here because I'm running myself out of space. But here I'll just you guys got that part. Just erase this. So in this place here, say, for example, we were braking still too much and we took off too much speed. Well, our braking force, which is taking us this way, would be stronger than our actual turning force. So what happens is our final vector is somewhere like this. And what then would happen is you'd realize, like, oh, I'm too slow. If I continue this arc, I'm going to hit the apex rather than clipping it. So, go over some big curb, hit a wall, or get an off track. So because we're not following that ideal arc, we end up kind of changing, we're changing the arc basically to something suboptimal. And similarly, somewhere here, and I'll draw it up here, like we're still steering something like this, but we apply too much gas, well, again, our vector is something like that. Our final force is something like that, which takes us, rather than clipping the apex here, takes us there. And this is it's a more mathematical explanation of something we all pretty much know, right? Like if you have too much power on exit, if you're not spinning, you're probably in the wall. But that all kind of gives you an idea of what you're looking for when you're trying to find your MRP. What you're looking for is that kind of tip of the perfect racing arc. And you'll begin to, the more you try and start to feel for it, the more you'll start to actually, like, you'll get it, and you'll be like, okay, that's roughly where it is. But a really good rule of thumb to start off with is you want to have rotated 50% of the total rotation of the corner prior to getting back on the gas, back on the power. So in this particular example, it's 90 degrees. You don't want to be back on power until you've rotated 90 degrees through the corner, because if you rotate too much, as we showed, you're hitting the apex here. And if you don't rotate enough, well, what do you have to do? You've got, like, let's say you only rotated 70. Well, 70. Now you've got 110 degrees to rotate in this particular section, which means you will absolutely have to go slower. There's no two ways about it. If you need to rotate more, you have to go slower. So, yeah, good rule of thumb for corners where you're slowing down a significant amount and turning is you want to have 50% of your rotation done through the corner before getting back on power. And I will exit all of this because on...
I want to comment
yeah, go on.
a little bit. So this is the geometrical reason why you normally want to get on throttle at the apex. As you saw, if you get on throttle earlier or later, you're pushing the car in a useless direction. It's also the reason why if you overslow the car on entry, it's usually better to just coast into the apex rather than trying to fix the problem by accelerating, because that's pulling the car again in the wrong direction. It's not helping.
Was there any... I don't want to interrupt you if there was more.
No, that's all.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that's a really good point too. Don't coasting is, if you've overslowed, coasting is for sure the best solution. So for this particular point, I've kind of I tried to illustrate. It's actually, and even I think I did in this first corner too. But it's really important to start to get used to, like, to realizing what you've done in the corner. So not just for me, for example, like I would, before I would, you go through a corner, you mess up, and you kind of just be like, well, I'm bad, and I need to be better the next time around. When I'm doing things, I need to be more accurate. It's like, okay, but you haven't actually identified what went wrong in the corner. Was I stuck at the apex on entry, for example? Like, could I not carry the speed out of the corner that I wanted to because I had an apex in my way? I.e., I would cut the corner, or did the car not quite get to the apex as I wanted it to? The reason for that is you were trying to carry too much speed into the corner generally, or a combination of things too. Like if you were angled really poorly, so in this corner here, if you were angled out this way and you didn't get to the apex, well, okay, I didn't have the car straight. I had too much rotation to make. But if you had the car straight and you were braking properly, but you still missed the apex, I can't remember if I did here. No, this is fine. This is an example of overslowing, actually. But so if you slightly miss the apex, okay, well, next time I need to just carry slightly less speed into the corner. Let me try that next time around. Or if you're you had to lift off on exit, it's like, again, I needed to I didn't have the car rotated enough, and I was trying to carry too much speed through the apex, so I'm going to carry slightly less. In this example, it's the complete opposite. So watch what happens here. I'm nowhere near the exit there because I get stuck here, and I'm just not carrying enough speed. How do we know that? Well, on exit, I can just steer away from the apex, because basically you shouldn't be. My HUD's not on. If you're at max brake or max power on the apex of the corner, and you are doing this, because the real exit of the corner is roughly here, right? If you're carrying as much speed as you should, there's only one thing possible there. You didn't carry enough speed through the corner. Like there's no, if you're only half, if you only got half the power on here and you're on the inside, okay, sure, you could be more on power and using all of it. But if your corner looks like this, make it, okay, perfect, full power, and I can just, use extra steering and stay away from the apex, that's, you haven't carried enough speed. You should be forced to the very exit of the corner, the optimal racing line, if you've carried the proper amount of speed there. And that's where, once you get into the position where, or the, and with enough practice, where you're feeling like that's where you feel the limit, right? Is you go, okay, I can't actually turn out of the apex, I can't actually turn out of this racing arc to avoid the wall or getting an off track on exit. I'm running it right to the line, and that's, there's no more available there in terms of turning. I'm gonna understeer if I try and turn more. That's your max, that's your limit. So at that point, I've carried the most amount of speed through this corner for my corner setup. Maybe your corner setup could be slightly altered and you could carry more, but that's how you start to know. So this is an example of not carrying enough speed. And I think I did something similar in the following corner. Let's just see. Okay, so this was the opposite example. Perfect. So on this corner, look what happens. I really miss the apex, and then I have, I'm not, by this point, I'd be way slower than if I had hit the apex.
That's the over rotation you were talking about earlier, correct?
Yeah, well, it's both actually. It's
because of the position of where you're landing and you're still actually turning.
Yes, exactly.
Towards the inside of the corner, you should be aiming more towards the outside.
More towards the outside, and actually at this previous corner too. So, this one here, that's, if you look at where my steering wheel is, and continue. Well, I open it up there. Actually, I'd stopped it right at the right spot. At this corner, I can get way more rotation on exit than I should be. My steering should be very open and I should be heading out here, but instead, I'm heading here. If I'm able to do that, that's a really good example of over rotation on exit, or alternatively, like we said, is just getting to the exit too early, so you have to bleed off your speed. So it's one of the two.
Basically, what you were saying is if you had carried more speed, the car would have drifted all by itself.
Exactly.
Out towards the edge of the track.
Exactly.
And you were actually trying to not fix it, but you're trying to follow it by unwinding the steering wheel and allowing the car to still venture out to the right.
Exactly. Basically, so that's exactly right. And so basically on entry, what you should be so everything you do from, the braking point is right here. Everything you do from your braking point to your turn-in to your trail braking to the apex, that whole phase, what you're trying to force the car to do is to force it out right to the optimal point of exit of the corner, basically, before you're kind of safely through the corner. And so if you haven't forced it enough, you'll be able to do what I did in this lap, right? Just completely steer away from the outside of the track and not use all the track and not use all the speed. So you're trying to force the car to drift out towards there, but obviously not force it so much that you're going to get an off track. So that's where the balance comes in. And then at this corner, I overcook it, right? I try and carry too much speed in the corner, and then when I go to rotate, so this is where we're talking. This is the whole vector thing. So the exit, the final direction of exit is something like this, right? So, but in this case, I didn't brake enough. So my braking is something like this, but, and when it should be, and my steering, we're steering out this way. So my final direction is, well, actually that's not perfect, but final direction is something like this. So my turning is like this, but I didn't brake enough. So I don't have enough to pull the car out this way. I'm still headed out this way. Whereas really what I should have done is braked more, so that pulls us back, and then we still have our same steering, and that kind of combination brings us out this way. And then that's what you got to start feeling is like, okay, this happened this lap. I was wide. I didn't get to the apex, which is somewhere around here. I was way wide and then continued wide, and I was able to get back to it here, but that's way too late. So next lap, I have to actually hit my maximum rotation point, because at this, in this corner, the maximum rotation point is probably somewhere around here, maybe back here, where really it should be here. The slowest point on the corner where we're rotating the most. But here, I didn't do enough slowing down. So if I'm having to continue to slow down, obviously I'm continuing to turn more, so our MRP is here. And then, so on the following lap, just run it through here. We're going to see we're going to hit a lot better. So first of all, watch where the car is going when I'm, basically max throttle or just before it. Like at that point, I wouldn't be able to steer anymore. Like I wouldn't be able to turn left and get the car to actually turn left. I would just understeer. So I'm pulling the car towards that optimal point. And same thing here, obviously. I'm trying to change what I did from the previous lap.
Basically is directing itself out there.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. So I think that's pretty much it. To find your MRP, you're looking at basically you want to have 50% of the rotation done before the corner, and that's a really good baseline to look at to be able to start fine-tuning, because once you find that rough spot, and actually one more thing I'll say, when you're looking, when you're starting your practice, using this kind of view is really useful, because like from here you can like really get an idea of what are the angles of the corner. This one's pretty straightforward.
Can you show forced elbow as an example? Because I think that's a pretty extreme one.
Yeah, for sure. So here, let's
Run the lap.
run the lap. All right, I'm still in this. That's why.
I think it really helps to learn what line you should actually take.
Yeah, I think this was my great lap, but I'm trying not to be bad. So I'll just run it through here. I probably didn't use it. So you see this. It's a really weird corner. It's tough to see what the car's actually doing. So you pause. Well, you save your replay. You don't pause, but and you go out to this view here.
Ilpo, just as a quick thing, is there a possibility you could explain how to use the free cam?
Thank you.
Well, it's not really rocket science.
No. I mean, let's put it this way. I don't know how to use a PC more than turning it on. So some people may not have the the dexterity that you guys do.
Not like I'm doing right now is a good rule. Perfect. Okay, that's better.
Yeah, but he can explain it fairly well because he is very good at it.
So this is probably the best angle to see forest elbow. This really doesn't show you the elevation, but there's nothing we can do about that. So our entry, is roughly here, right? Our exit, roughly here.
Well over 90 degrees.
Well over 90 degrees. our apex, and this is where this is a corner where you would absolutely be fine tuning, right? Like it's really difficult to figure out where exactly you're going to apex, both in the car and and even from on top. And you know what? Before I even do that, let's just run this really slowly. So I haven't apexed yet. Well, actually, I have there, but because the point of maximum rotation for me, so where am I? So yeah, roughly just before this. So now we can draw our thing. So yeah, entry here, roughly. Exit here. Our apex was roughly here. So through there. So, this is quite a tight corner, and what we're trying to do is, the car's coming through here, and we want to know when can we, and we have to keep in mind that we do actually have a little bit of room here, which we can use. But when can we begin to, like if we draw we'll draw it in green, draw the circle through this corner. Whoops. Because apex it's more like that. Where at this corner is roughly halfway. And so if you were noticing that you're trying to get back on power here, like from this this overhead view, like we can clearly see that's too early, right? Like there's no way that you're going to be able to start carrying more speed through the corner at this point, because you still have all this rotation to get through. On the flip side of that, like if you're still slowing down up until this point, you're obviously not going to be carrying enough speed, and because all like this whole section here, so this distance here, you're going to be sacrificing because you won't be on power yet. So you're always going to be carrying less speed as you come out of the corner. So, it's not always immediately obvious that, your maximum rotation point should be right here. Like it's not necessarily the case. Some corners are going to mean like it might be here on this corner, for example, because it's so tight right here that you can't actually get back on power properly until this point, because you always will end up here. So that's where you are going to fine tune a little bit, but that's where you test, right? So you go, okay, so my 50% point is roughly right here. If I start to get back on the power there, am I having to lift off somewhere here so that I don't hit the wall? Or can I really get on the power and get a good exit? So once you found that point, well, you go back in the car. Let's get out of this. You go back in the car from this point. You go, okay, like where on the track is this actually? So you might run it back really slowly, and you can try and find yourself some visual cue of like where is this actually, like it's right before this kind of blind point that I know I can start getting back on power. And then you try it one lap, and let's just say this is the lap, so you run it back a little bit, and you put it half speed or something, and you watch your what you want to be doing here is watching your gas pedal, throttle and brake. Do I have to? So you say to yourself, okay, I can pretty much get back on power here, and then do I have to lift off at all? Am I right at the exit of the corner? If the answer is no, okay, then the question becomes, can I actually get on power earlier, or did I just simply not not get on power quickly enough. So same spot, but I can actually bring it up more. In a corner like this, probably not, because traction's at a premium here. So maybe you can actually just simply carry more speed through this corner. And the answer, on this particular lap is certainly yes. I would be able to carry more still get on power at the same spot, but actually be carrying a few kilometers an hour more as I get back on power right there. But it's not immediately obvious, right? Like, I'll slow it down a lot. Like, it's a really blind corner. It feels so tough. And I probably could have been more to the outside on entry, actually, here. But it does get quite slippy at a certain point.
Can I make a point, though?
Yeah, go on.
Notice how your hands are no more than 90 degrees in this corner?
Yeah.
This, I would say, to a certain extent, this is also a good indication of how much grip you actually have, and that you've entered the corner properly, because you're not, oh shit, with the wheel turning and turning and turning, trying to get more rotation into the corner. So just as a for instance, guys, pay attention to the angle that he has here. Not that you can duplicate it in any other car, but it's a good indication that you shouldn't have to turn much more than that, specifically down into this corner, if you do it correctly. Yeah.
Exactly. That's a good point. Like, if you find yourself having to steer a lot, i.e. a lot of steering lock, you're probably not entering the corner from the right spot, or you're trying to ask more of the car than it's actually
set up for.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, this forced elbow example is a really good one, because it's quite a tricky corner, and because of all the weird visual cues and how blind it is, it's not like who thinks that you'd be able to be at 75% throttle here right now? Like, it just doesn't look possible, right? So the human temptation is to wait until you're here and go, oh look, I've got an exit, I've got some room, and then get on power. But if we zoom out at this point,
that's a full 2 car lengths beyond mid center.
And you're probably too late, because your brain's only telling you now. Your foot hasn't even got on the throttle yet, right? So it's physically possible to get the car around here with being on throttle here, but because you haven't analyzed it and you're just waiting for that visual cue of, oh yeah, it's safe now, you're wasting speed on exit, and this is quite an important exit, as we all know. We're full throttle all the way down to here. So that's where tricky corners like this, I mean, this is easily one of the hardest in the game, I'd say, but especially for visual cues, that's where having that idea of like, okay, roughly at 50%, unless there's something in my way. So for example, if this wall stuck out just a little bit more, like, it literally would be in the way of 50% of the corner, because you would be trying to get on power, but it would be like, if it stuck out to here, like, it would totally cut the angle here, and you'd have to get a really wide entry into it to be able to make it round. But if you follow this curve, the 50%, like we said, it is roughly right about there. So yeah, that's basically, look at it on tricky corners where you're slowing down a lot and there's a lot of time, especially if you see you're losing a lot of time. Use this free cam view to kind of spot where you should roughly be getting back on power, and play with entry speed and apex speed at that, with getting back on power at that point, and you'll almost certainly find time. Go on.
How do you get that free camera? Because I have a slightly different camera's findings, and I could never get that to activate in replay.
So for most people, if you're just in your regular view, like F1 will change your camera views like this, and then if you hit F7, that'll bring you into free cam mode. So you should be able to kind of up and down, left, right with your mouse. And then the arrow keys will bring you forward, left, right, and you can then just like, so you would go down with your mouse and then back, and that zooms you out.
I see.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So yeah, F7, mouse, and your arrow keys, and that you can do all that kind of stuff. Be
careful with the scroll.
Oh yes.
Send it out into the ether.
So I think.
Oh, the Matrix. Okay.
Yeah, it's was it key acceleration or something? So if I go forward on my mouse, there you go. See? So then I need to scroll it back to get it to. So yeah, do be careful. But yeah, that's basically how to do it. Yeah, it's been, as usual, an hour and 15 minutes instead of the 45 minutes I was aiming for, but this is quite dense. Any questions, things you guys want clarified, something else that came up from watching other stuff that you guys want to ask about? Cool. Okay. So I will wrap it up there. Hopefully I've recorded this and the sound works. And yeah, I'll post this up as quick as I can. And feel free to DM me on this one or ask in coaching chat or House of Practice, because I know this one it's a little bit tougher to understand kind of right off the bat, and maybe a little bit harder to immediately apply to your practice sessions. So yeah, let me know if you're struggling with any of it. If you don't, you get to it and you don't remember anything. So yeah, let me know. And other than that, I'll wish you guys all a great night.
Wow, thank you, man.
Thanks, sir. Thank you all for coming out.